It was a scorching afternoon on the city's main pedestrian bridge. The concrete was hot enough to burn, and the air was thick with the smell of exhaust and expensive perfume. An old man named Mr. Fedrick sat quietly against the blue metal railing, his clothes tattered and his beard gray with dust. To the thousands of people rushing past, he was just another invisible piece of poverty, but he watched every face with eyes that were far too sharp for a beggar. He was looking for something that money couldn't buy. Suddenly, the rhythmic clicking of designer heels stopped right in front of him. Valerie and her two friends stood there, Valerie's eyes hidden behind dark glasses, looking down at him as if he were a stain on the bridge. "You again," Valerie snapped, her voice dripping with a pride that could chill the sun. "Why do you keep disgracing the city like this? People like you have no shame, sitting here like a goat waiting for free coins." The old man didn't say a word, even when Valerie leaned in and whispered, "You're the reason this country is backward. You should just die quietly so the rest of us can enjoy the view." She turned to her friends and laughed, "Only the strong walk over the weak. Right, girls?" The crowd went silent, the cruelty hanging heavy in the air. But just as Valerie turned to walk away, a clear, firm voice cut through the laughter. "Enough." A young woman named Rosaline, wearing a simple yellow shirt and a patterned apron, stepped forward and dropped her grocery bags. She didn't look at the wealthy women. She walked straight to Mr. Fedrick. To the shock of the onlookers, she knelt on the hot concrete, placing herself lower than the man everyone else was mocking. "I'm so sorry, Papa," she whispered, her voice full of a peace that Valerie could never understand. She opened a small container of fresh food and handed it to him with both hands, a gesture of deep respect. "Don't listen to them. Your gray hair is a crown, not a curse." Valerie scoffed, "Another poor rat trying to feel important. You both look like you belong in the mud." Rosaline stood up slowly, her eyes meeting Valerie's with a fire that made the socialite blink. "I may be poor in pocket, but you are empty in soul," Rosaline fired back. "One day, the same man you are insulting might be the one you'll need to bow to." Valerie's face turned red with rage, but she couldn't find a reply. She stormed off, her heels clicking angrily away, while Mr. Fedrick looked up at Rosaline with a slow, knowing smile. In that moment, the billionaire in rags knew his search was over. He had found the gold he was looking for, but the real test was only just beginning. If you're just tuning into this channel, please subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to share with your friends and family, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments section. The heavy iron gates of the Fedrick estate swung open with a silent, motorized precision, allowing the dusty figure of Mr. Fedrick to slip inside. To any passerby, he looked like a man who had lost everything, his feet dragging in worn-out sandals and his tattered coat stained by the city's grime. But as he stepped onto the manicured lawn of the sprawling mansion, the security guards stood at stiff attention, their faces masks of disciplined respect for the billionaire who chose to walk among the shadows. Mr. Fedrick ignored the grandeur of the white pillars and the shimmering fountain in the driveway, heading instead for a side entrance that led to his private quarters. He needed to wash away the scent of the pedestrian bridge before his son saw him, though he knew the smell of his social experiments always seemed to linger in the air. Inside the house, the atmosphere was cool and filtered, a world away from the humid, insulting air of the city streets. The floors were covered in soft Persian rugs that swallowed the sound of his footsteps, and the walls were adorned with artwork that cost more than a village could earn in a decade. Mr. Fedrick reached his room and began the slow process of peeling off the persona of the beggar. He folded the rags with a strange kind of reverence, placing them in a hidden compartment of his mahogany wardrobe. To him, these clothes were not a disguise. They were a lens through which he saw the unfiltered truth of the human heart. As he stepped into the steaming shower, he thought of the young woman, Rosaline, and the way she had knelt beside him without a single thought for her own reputation. A short while later, dressed in a simple but expensive linen robe, Mr. Fedrick walked into the vast living room. His son Gabriel was already there, leaning against a marble counter with a tablet in his hand and a deep frown on his face. Gabriel was the image of success, sharp, focused, and wealthy in his own right, but tonight, His eyes were clouded with frustration. He looked up as his father approached, his gaze immediately falling on the faint smudge of dirt near his father's ear that the shower had missed. "You were out there again, weren't you?" Gabriel asked, his voice a mix of exhaustion and concern. He set the tablet down on the counter with a sharp click. "I don't understand this, Dad. We have everything. You have more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes, and yet you spend your afternoons sitting on a bridge, letting people mock you. Do you know how dangerous that is? Do you know what it does to our reputation?" Mr. Fedrick sat down slowly in a plush leather armchair, his face calm and unbothered by his son's outburst. "Reputation is a shadow, Gabriel. It's what people think of you. Character is the light. It's who you actually are when you think no one is looking." He leaned back, his eyes searching his son's face. "I saw many people today. I saw women who wear gold but have hearts of stone. They laughed at an old man because they thought his poverty made him less than human." Gabriel sighed, rubbing his temples. "People are cruel, Dad. That's not a secret. You don't need to put yourself in harm's way to prove it. I'm 36 years old, and instead of enjoying our success, I'm constantly worried that someone will recognize you and cause a scandal." He walked over to the window, looking out at the high walls that protected their privacy. "I have a life, too. I have a girlfriend, Valerie, and I want her to meet my father, the billionaire, the philanthropist. Not the man who smells like the city's exhaust." Gabriel rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of his father's relentless standard. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Papa, actually, I've been meaning to tell you. I have been seeing someone." The old man's eyebrows shot up instantly, and he turned toward his son with a sudden sharp energy. "You do? And why am I just hearing this now?" Gabriel shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted to be sure before I brought her into your world. Her name is Valerie." Mr. Fedrick studied his son's face for a long time. "Tell me about her. Is she a woman of substance?" Gabriel looked away, his expression darkening slightly. "She is beautiful, Papa. Very smart and ambitious." He paused, searching for the right words to satisfy his father's scrutiny. "But I will be honest with you. She is proud. She has a temper, and sometimes she speaks to people as if they are beneath her. She spends money easily, always wanting the best of everything just to show it off to her friends." The billionaire patriarch shook his head in a slow, disappointed rhythm. "Then why are you with her, Gabriel? Is beauty enough to hold a home together when the storms come?" Gabriel sighed deeply. "I thought I could change her, Papa. When she is calm, she can be sweet. But when she feels slighted, she becomes someone else entirely." Mr. Fedrick reached out and gripped his son's shoulder. "Listen to me. A woman should bring peace into your life, not noise. She should be someone who helps you grow, not someone who wastes what you have worked so hard to build." He stood up, his mind already formulating a plan. "Bring her here. I want to see her with my own eyes. I want to look into her soul." Gabriel chuckled softly, sensing the trap. "You want to surprise her with the mansion and the money." Mr. Fedrick gave a small enigmatic smile as he looked toward the window that overlooked the manicured gardens. "No," he said quietly. "I want her to surprise herself. Tell her nothing special about me. Let her come here and meet me exactly as I am, not as the man on the Forbes list." He wanted Valerie to arrive without the filter of greed, allowing her natural character to be the only thing she brought to the table. Gabriel nodded slowly, knowing that his father was setting a stage that Valerie might not be prepared to walk upon. The sun was a relentless orb in the sky, baking the asphalt of the supermarket parking lot until the air shimmered with heat. Mr. Fedrick, still draped in the heavy dusty rags that had become his second skin, sat tucked into a small patch of shade near the entrance. To the bustling shoppers, he was a fixture of misfortune, a silent witness to their consumerism as they hurried past with clinking carts and rustling bags. He didn't beg, he simply sat with a plastic bowl before him, observing the hearts of men through the narrow lens of perceived poverty. The peace of the afternoon was shattered by the aggressive growl of a luxury engine. A sleek black Range Rover pulled into the VIP slot with a sharp jerk, its tires screeching against the pavement. The door swung open, and Valerie stepped out, her movements sharp and filled with an unearned authority. She adjusted her dark glasses, a scowl already forming on her lips as she surveyed the area. The moment her eyes landed on the old man, her posture stiffened. She didn't see a father or a human being. She saw an eyesore that offended her sense of status. She marched toward him, her designer heels clicking like a metronome of impending doom. "You again," she snapped, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the supermarket. "Are you following me, you dirty, smelling man? Why do you keep disgracing your generation like this?" Mr. Fedric remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the ground, though his mind was racing, recording every syllable of her cruelty. Valerie didn't wait for a response, her anger fueled by a belief that those beneath her were meant to be stepping stones. "Do you enjoy sitting here like a goat? Poor people like you have no shame," she continued, her voice rising so that several shoppers stopped to stare. She gestured broadly at his tattered clothes. "Look at your face. You're a useless man. Maybe you were cursed. You're the reason the country is backward, sitting here waiting for help instead of just dying quietly." To emphasize her point, she leaned down and spat near his feet, her face twisted in a mask of pure disgust. The crowd remained paralyzed, uncomfortable but unwilling to interfere, until a young woman emerged from the supermarket doors carrying 2 heavy grocery bags. Rosaline paused, her breath catching as she witnessed the final act of Valerie's tirade. Without hesitation, she dropped her bags, the sound of their impact echoing against the glass doors. "Enough," she said, her voice not loud, but carrying a weight that demanded attention. Valerie spun around, her eyes narrowing as she took in Rosaline's simple yellow shirt and worn apron. "Who are you?" she barked, looking Rosaline up and down with practiced condescension. "Someone who still has a sense of humanity," Rosaline replied, stepping between the billionaire in disguise and the woman who thought she owned the world. Valerie let out a harsh, jagged laugh. "Another poor rat trying to feel important. What is it to you?" "You're insulting an old man for no reason," Rosaline said sharply. "What did he ever do to you?" "He exists," Valerie screamed, her composure beginning to crack under the pressure of Rosaline's calm defiance. "That's what he did. Dirty men like him shouldn't even be allowed outside." Rosaline didn't flinch. She stepped closer, forcing Valerie to maintain eye contact. "He is old enough to be your father. Have you no shame?" "Is he my father? Look at him." Valerie gestured wildly. "He's probably your father. You both look poor and pathetic." Rosaline's expression shifted from anger to a deep, pitying sadness. "Maybe he is my father in spirit. At least he isn't empty like you," she said, her words hitting with the precision of a surgeon's blade. Infuriated, Valerie stepped forward, her hand shaking. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who my boyfriend is? I can get you arrested in 2 minutes." "Arrest me for what?" "For telling you to respect your elders." Rosaline didn't blink. "You're just noisy with lipstick, nothing more. You're jealous because you have everything but you have no character." The silence that followed was heavy. Valerie looked around at the gathered crowd, seeing not admiration for her wealth, but judgment for her behavior. With a final hissed insult, she stormed back to her Range Rover, slammed the door, and sped off, leaving a cloud of dust in her wake. Rosaline immediately turned to Mr. Fedric, her face softening instantly. She knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "I'm so sorry, Papa. Please, don't let her words reach your heart," she whispered. Mr. Fedric looked into her eyes, seeing a reflection of the sincerity his son desperately needed. "Thank you, my daughter," he said softly, his voice thick with genuine emotion. In that moment, the supermarket parking lot felt less like a place of commerce and more like the ground where a life-changing truth had finally taken root. The sun was a relentless orb in the sky, baking the asphalt of the supermarket parking lot until the air shimmered with heat. Mr. Frederick, still draped in the heavy dusty rags that had become his second skin, sat tucked into a small patch of shade near the entrance. To the bustling shoppers, he was a fixture of misfortune, a silent witness to their consumerism as they hurried past with clinking carts and rustling bags. He didn't beg, he simply sat with a plastic bowl before him, observing the hearts of men through the narrow lens of perceived poverty. The peace of the afternoon was shattered by the aggressive growl of a luxury engine. A sleek black Range Rover pulled into the VIP slot with a sharp jerk, its tires screeching against the pavement. The door swung open, and Valerie stepped out, her movements sharp and filled with an unearned authority. She adjusted her dark glasses, a scowl already forming on her lips as she surveyed the area. The moment her eyes landed on the old man, her posture stiffened. She didn't see a father or a human being. She saw an eyesore that offended her sense of status. She marched toward him, her designer heels clicking like a metronome of impending doom. "You again," she snapped, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the supermarket. "Are you following me, you dirty, smelling man? Why do you keep disgracing your generation like this?" Mr. Frederick remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the ground, though his mind was racing, recording every syllable of her cruelty. Valerie didn't wait for a response, her anger fueled by a belief that those beneath her were meant to be stepping stones. "Do you enjoy sitting here like a goat? Poor people like you have no shame," she continued, her voice rising so that several shoppers stopped to stare. She gestured broadly at his tattered clothes. "Look at your face. You're a useless man. Maybe you were cursed. You're the reason the country is backward, sitting here waiting for help instead of just dying quietly." To emphasize her point, she leaned down and spat near his feet, her face twisted in a mask of pure disgust. The crowd remained paralyzed, uncomfortable but unwilling to interfere, until a young woman emerged from the supermarket doors carrying 2 heavy grocery bags. Rosaline paused, her breath catching as she witnessed the final act of Valerie's tirade. Without hesitation, she dropped her bags, the sound of their impact echoing against the glass doors. "Enough," she said, her voice not loud, but carrying a weight that demanded attention. Valerie spun around, her eyes narrowing as she took in Rosaline's simple yellow shirt and worn apron. "Who are you?" she barked, looking Rosaline up and down with practiced condescension. "Someone who still has a sense of humanity," Rosaline replied, stepping between the billionaire in disguise and the woman who thought she owned the world. Valerie let out a harsh, jagged laugh. "Another poor rat trying to feel important. What is it to you?" "You're insulting an old man for no reason," Rosaline said sharply. "What did he ever do to you?" "He exists," Valerie screamed, her composure beginning to crack under the pressure of Rosaline's calm defiance. "That's what he did. Dirty men like him shouldn't even be allowed outside." Rosaline didn't flinch. She stepped closer, forcing Valerie to maintain eye contact. "He is old enough to be your father. Have you no shame?" "Is he my father? Look at him." Valerie gestured wildly. "He's probably your father. You both look poor and pathetic." Rosaline's expression shifted from anger to a deep, pitying sadness. "Maybe he is my father in spirit. At least he isn't empty like you," she said, her words hitting with the precision of a surgeon's blade. Infuriated, Valerie stepped forward, her hand shaking. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who my boyfriend is? I can get you arrested in 2 minutes." "Arrest me for what?" "For telling you to respect your elders." Rosaline didn't blink. "You're just noisy with lipstick, nothing more. You're jealous because you have everything but you have no character." The silence that followed was heavy. Valerie looked around at the gathered crowd, seeing not admiration for her wealth, but judgment for her behavior. With a final hissed insult, she stormed back to her Range Rover, slammed the door, and sped off, leaving a cloud of dust in her wake. Rosaline immediately turned to Mr. Frederick, her face softening instantly. She knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "I'm so sorry, Papa." "Please, don't let her words reach your heart," she whispered. Mr. Frederick looked into her eyes, seeing a reflection of the sincerity his son desperately needed. "Thank you, my daughter," he said softly, his voice thick with genuine emotion. In that moment, the supermarket parking lot felt less like a place of commerce and more like the ground where a life-changing truth had finally taken root. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting long golden shadows across the bridge as the crowds thinned out. Mr. Frederick, still draped in his dusty, oversized coat, watched Rosaline as she sat on the concrete beside him. There was no hesitation in her movements, no fear that his tattered clothes would soil her own. She looked at him not with the pity one gives a stray animal, but with the genuine curiosity one offers a mentor. "Papa," she began softly, her voice carrying the rhythmic lilt of someone raised near the soil, "I have been watching you for 2 days now." She opened her small bag and pulled out a bottle of water, handing it to him with the same reverence she had shown during the confrontation with Valerie. "You sit here with so much peace, even when people who have nothing in their heads try to pour shame on you. But a man of your wisdom should not be sitting here waiting for the world to notice him." Mr. Frederick took a slow sip of the water, his eyes twinkling behind the grime he had carefully applied to his face. "And what should an old man like me be doing, my daughter? My legs are tired, and the world has told me I am useless." Rosaline shook her head firmly, her eyes bright with a sudden spark of inspiration. "No one is useless as long as the earth is still beneath our feet. I studied agriculture in the university, Papa. I am a graduate with honors, yet here I am, selling small things just to keep my parents back in the village from starving." She leaned in closer, her hands moving with excitement. "Behind the stores near the edge of town, there is a small stretch of land that no one uses. It is overgrown with weeds, but the soil, I have tested it with my fingers, it is rich. It is waiting." Mr. Frederick felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon heat. "You want to farm with a beggar?" he asked, testing her one last time. "I want to farm with a father," she corrected him gently. "We don't need much. We can start with a small basket of okra, some peppers, and fluted pumpkin leaves. I have the strength to clear the land, and you have the patience to watch the seeds grow. We can sell the harvest at the morning market. You won't have to sit here and endure the insults of people who think money is a substitute for manners." As she spoke, she began to sketch a plan in the dust on the bridge floor, showing him where the irrigation would go and how they would protect the young shoots from the sun. She spoke to him as a partner, an equal, unaware that the man she was trying to save could buy the entire city block with a single phone call. Mr. Frederick looked at her calloused hands and the simple yellow shirt that had become dampened with sweat. He thought of his son, Gabriel, and the hollow, expensive life he was living with Valerie. He thought of how many people had walked past him today, seeing only a dirty-smelling man. Yet, here was a girl with a degree and a future, offering her sweat and her time to give a stranger a sense of purpose. "You are a rare gem, Rosaline," he whispered, his voice cracking slightly with genuine emotion. "I am just a farmer's daughter, Papa," she laughed, standing up and brushing the dust from her apron. "So, do we have a deal? Tomorrow morning, when the dew is still on the grass, I will meet you here. I will bring the seeds, and you will bring that peaceful heart of yours." Mr. Frederick nodded slowly, a deep sense of hope finally settling in his spirit. He realized that his experiment had yielded something far more valuable than a test result. He had found the gold his son desperately needed. As she walked away, waving a cheerful goodbye, he stayed on the bridge a moment longer, looking up at the sky. He wasn't just a billionaire in disguise anymore. He was a man who had seen the best of humanity in the middle of a muddy, judgmental world. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the marble floors of the Frederick estate as Valerie stepped out of her luxury sedan. She straightened her designer dress and adjusted her dark glasses, feeling a surge of triumph. Today was the day she would finally secure her place in the Frederick dynasty. She had spent the morning bragging to her friends that Gabriel was finally taking her to meet the old lion, his billionaire father, Mr. Frederick. To her, This meeting was merely a formality before a ring was placed on her finger. As she walked toward the massive front doors, she hummed to herself, oblivious to the fact that her world was about to crumble. She looked around the foyer, impressed by the high ceilings and the expensive artwork lining the walls. "Not as modern as my father's place, but it will do," she whispered to herself with a smirk, her pride as inflated as ever. She expected to meet a man draped in silk and authority, someone who would look at her and see a woman of her own class. Gabriel met her in the hallway, looking handsome but unusually quiet. "Is your father ready?" Valerie asked, flashing a rehearsed smile. Gabriel nodded slowly and led her toward the main living room. "He's been waiting for you, Valerie. He says he's very interested in meeting the woman I've been spending all my money on." Valerie chuckled, thinking it was a joke about her expensive tastes. "Oh, you know I only deserve the best, Gabriel," she replied, patting her hair. They stepped into the large, sunlit room. Sitting on a plush velvet couch with his back to the window was an older man. He was dressed in a sharp, tailored navy suit, and his silver hair was perfectly groomed. Valerie took a deep breath, putting on her most charming expression. "Mr. Frederick, it is such an honor to finally meet the man who built this empire," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. The man on the couch didn't move at first. He let the silence stretch until the air felt heavy. Then, slowly, he turned his head to look at her. Valerie's smile didn't just fade, it vanished instantly, as if wiped away by a cold wind. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and her handbag nearly slipped from her numb fingers. The face looking back at her wasn't that of a stranger. It was the face of the smelly beggar from the pedestrian bridge. "You!" she gasped, her voice cracking into a thin whisper. The room seemed to grow smaller as the reality of the situation set in. Mr. Frederick stood up slowly, his movements graceful and full of a power she had completely missed when he was sitting in the dust. He didn't look angry, he looked disappointed, which was far more terrifying to Valerie. "Yes, Valerie," Mr. Frederick said, his voice calm and resonant. "We have met before. Twice, if I recall correctly. Once when you splashed mud on my clothes without an apology, and again yesterday when you told me I was a disgrace to my generation and should die quietly." Gabriel looked between his father and his girlfriend, his face hardening as the pieces began to fit together. "Wait, Papa, is this the woman you were telling me about? The one who insulted you at the supermarket?" Mr. Frederick nodded, never taking his eyes off Valerie's pale face. "The very same. She told me that only the strong walk over the weak. She believed that because I wore rags, I had no voice and no value." Valerie began to tremble, her eyes filling with tears of panic rather than remorse. "Gabriel, I didn't know. I thought he was just a beggar. If I had known he was your father, I would never have said those things." Mr. Frederick stepped forward, his gaze piercing. "And that is exactly the problem, Valerie. You only show respect when you think someone has the power to give you something. Real kindness is how you treat those who can do absolutely nothing for you." Valerie reached out to grab Gabriel's arm, but he stepped back, looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. The mask of beauty had fallen, and all that was left was the ugliness of her character. The unmasking was complete. The billionaire's test had revealed a heart that was far too poor for the Frederick name. The atmosphere inside the Frederick mansion was heavy, the silence so thick it felt like it could shatter at the slightest sound. Gabriel stood in the center of the expansive living room, his hands trembling with a mixture of rage and profound disappointment. Across from him, Valerie looked like a ghost, her face pale and her eyes darting between the man she hoped to marry and the old man sitting calmly on the sofa. Mr. Frederick, no longer in his dusty rags but dressed in a simple clean tunic, watched the scene with the quiet dignity of a judge. "Gabriel, honey, please," Valerie whispered, her voice finally breaking the stillness, though it lacked its usual sharp confidence. "I didn't know. If I had known he was your father, I never would have said those things. It was all a misunderstanding." Gabriel turned to her, his eyes cold and hard like flint. "That is exactly the problem, Valerie," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You didn't need to know he was my father to treat him like a human being. You saw an old man who appeared to have nothing, and you decided he was beneath your respect. You chose to pour mud and shame on him simply because you thought he couldn't fight back." Valerie stepped forward, reaching out to touch Gabriel's arm, but he flinched away as if her touch were poisonous. "I was just stressed. The heat on that bridge was too much, and I—" "Enough." Gabriel snapped, the word echoing off the high ceilings. "My father spent his life building this legacy with a woman who had a heart of gold. He taught me that wealth is a responsibility, not a weapon. You told me you were bold and strong, but today I see that you are just a bully with expensive lipstick." Mr. Fedrick stood up slowly, his movements deliberate. He walked toward Valerie, and for the first time, she had to look up at the beggar she had mocked. "You told me on that bridge that I should die quietly so people like you could enjoy the view," the old man said softly. "You told me I was a disgrace to my generation. But look at us now. The view you wanted to enjoy belongs to the man you claim to love, yet you despise the very person who gave him life." Valerie began to cry, the tears smearing her perfect makeup, but there was no pity in the room. She turned back to Gabriel, desperate. "Gabriel, we've been together for months. You know I love you. Don't let one mistake ruin everything we've built." "We haven't built anything, Valerie," Gabriel replied, his heart feeling like a weight in his chest. "I was building a future with a woman I thought existed. But that woman was a mask. The real Valerie is the one who spits at the feet of the elderly and mocks the poor for sport. My father wanted me to find a woman who would bring peace to this home, not someone who brings noise and cruelty." He walked to the large mahogany door and swung it open, the midday sun spilling across the polished floor. "I cannot marry a woman I do not respect, and I can never respect a woman who treats my father like trash." "Gabriel, please," she begged, her voice rising to a shrill plea. "Leave, Valerie," Gabriel said firmly, pointing toward the driveway. "Take your bags, take your pride, and never come back to this house. You love yourself far more than you could ever love me. Go find someone as empty as you are." Valerie looked at Mr. Fedrick one last time, hoping for a sign of forgiveness, but the old man simply nodded toward the door. Realizing she had lost everything, the billionaire lifestyle, the status, and the man she had manipulated, she let out a sob of pure frustration. She grabbed her designer handbag, her heels clicking a frantic hollow rhythm on the floor as she fled the mansion. As the sound of her car speeding away faded into the distance, Gabriel let out a long, shaky breath and sat down beside his father. The silence returned, but this time, it was peaceful. "I'm sorry, Papa," Gabriel whispered, looking at his hands. "You were right all along. I was blind." Mr. Fedrick placed a warm, firm hand on his son's shoulder. "Do not be sorry, my son. Some lessons can only be learned in the mud. Now that the noise is gone, you are finally ready to see the light." Gabriel drove far beyond the manicured lawns of his father's estate, seeking a place where the air didn't feel heavy with the scent of Valerie's expensive, suffocating perfume. He needed to think about the wreckage of his relationship and the startling revelation that his father, Mr. Fedrick, had been enduring public abuse just to test a heart that Gabriel realized was hollow. He eventually parked his car near a quiet stretch of land at the edge of town, where the city's noise faded into the rustle of leaves. Under the shade of a wide mango tree, he sat on a weathered bench, finally feeling a sense of calm for the first time in days. As he sat there, he noticed a young woman a short distance away, standing beside a narrow piece of land. She was dressed simply in a yellow shirt, her hair tied back, holding a bag of seeds in one hand and a small hoe in the other. She bent down, testing the soil with her fingers with a focused, gentle touch. When she noticed Gabriel watching her, she didn't look away with the practiced shyness of the women he usually met. Instead, she gave him a bright, honest smile. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying a natural warmth. Gabriel stood up, struck by her simplicity. "Good morning. Are you from around here?" "Just passing through," she replied, walking closer to the shade. I'm planning to start a small farm here. My name is Rosaline. Gabriel was impressed, noting that most young ladies he knew wouldn't dream of touching a hoe, let alone starting a farm. Rosaline laughed, a sound that felt more genuine than any socialite's giggle. I'm not like most ladies. I studied agriculture in school, and though I have no job yet, I have hands and a strong back. It's better than sitting at home doing nothing. As they spoke, Rosaline mentioned she was trying to help an old man she had met on a bridge. He's kind and wise, reminds me of my father, she said softly. He was being insulted by a woman who thought his poverty made him worthless, so I stood up for him. Now I want to help him start this farm so he can eat fresh food and feel useful. Gabriel's heart skipped a beat as she spoke. He recognized the story, yet he had no idea he was speaking to the very woman his father had praised. He admired her peace and her refusal to brag about her kindness. I wish more people thought like you, Gabriel said, feeling a strange, immediate bond. He looked at his own clean shoes and then at the soil. Can I help? Rosaline raised a brow playfully. You? With those soft hands? Gabriel smiled, a real smile. I can learn. And so the billionaire and the farmer began to plant seeds of okra together, two strangers finding a shared rhythm in the dirt, completely unaware that their lives were already woven together by the wisdom of an old man in rags. The morning air was crisp as Rosaline stood before the towering black gates of the address Mr. Frederick had scribbled on a piece of paper for her. She clutched her simple handbag, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had expected to find a modest home or perhaps a small apartment building where the elderly man she knew as a beggar shared a room. Instead, she found herself staring at a sprawling white mansion with manicured lawns and marble driveways that seemed to glow under the sun. This can't be right, she whispered to herself, double-checking the crumpled paper in her hand. A man who sits on a bridge wouldn't live in a palace. The heavy gates hummed open, and a security guard signaled for her to enter. As her sandals tapped nervously against the polished stone walkway, the sheer scale of the wealth around her felt suffocating. She felt out of place in her simple attire, a stark contrast to the glass walls and expensive artwork visible through the massive windows. Just as she was about to turn back, thinking she had made a terrible mistake, the front door swung wide. A man stepped out, dressed in a crisp, expensive shirt that fit his athletic frame perfectly. Rosaline froze, her breath catching in her throat. It was Gabriel, the handsome man she had met in the fields, the one who had knelt in the dirt to help her plant okra seeds just days before. Their eyes locked in a moment of pure, silent shock. "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice trembling. You live here?" Gabriel stepped forward, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning realization. "Rosaline, what are you doing at my father's house?" Before she could respond, a familiar deep chuckle echoed from the shadows of the grand foyer. Mr. Frederick walked out, but he was no longer the tattered, dusty man from the bridge. He wore a flowing, embroidered robe, and his gray beard was neatly groomed, though his eyes still held that same spark of ancient wisdom. "My daughter," he said, spreading his arms wide with a triumphant smile. Rosaline gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as the pieces of the puzzle finally slammed into place. "Papa," she stammered, looking from the billionaire to his successful son. "You told me you had nothing. You said you slept in a shop." Mr. Frederick walked down the steps and took her hand gently, his voice softening with genuine affection. "I told you that because I wanted to see who would look at my heart when my pockets were empty," he explained. "Many people bow to the crown, Rosaline, but you bowed to the man underneath it." Tears welled in Rosaline's eyes as the weight of his words sank in. She had offered him food and a future of hard work on a farm when she thought he was a homeless stranger, never dreaming that he was the architect of the very empire she was standing in. Gabriel reached out and took her other hand, his smile radiating a warmth that confirmed his father's choice. "My father kept telling me he found gold on that bridge," Gabriel said softly. "I didn't realize he was talking about the same woman who captured my heart in the field." In the silence of the massive estate, Rosaline realized her act of kindness had led her exactly where she was meant to be. The sun had barely risen when the heavy iron gates of the state high court swung open, marking the final day of a scandal that had gripped the city. Inside the courtroom, Valerie sat in the dock, her designer dress now wrinkled and her once proud posture slumped in defeat. She looked frantically toward the gallery, hoping to find a sympathetic face, but she found only the stern, unwavering gaze of Mr. Frederick and the disappointed eyes of Gabriel. When the judge called for order, the room fell into a deathly silence. The prosecution played the final piece of evidence, a crystal-clear voice recording captured by Johnson. Valerie's own voice filled the chambers, cold and calculating, as she detailed the plan to plant illicit substances in Gabriel's office and expressed her wicked desire to see Rosaline and Mr. Frederick gone forever. The recording captured her mocking laughter as she referred to Mr. Frederick as a useless, dirty man. As the audio finished, Valerie burst into hysterical tears, claiming she was drunk and that the devil had influenced her, but the judge was moved by neither her beauty nor her wealth. He noted that real kindness does not depend on who is watching and that her jealousy had led her to plot murder. With a sharp strike of the gavel, he sentenced Valerie to 15 years in prison with no option for bail, ensuring that her reign of pride had come to a definitive end. As the police led Valerie away in handcuffs, Gabriel felt a massive weight lift from his shoulders. He turned to Johnson, the man Valerie had tried to hire, and shook his hand firmly. Johnson had risked everything to return the favor Gabriel had shown his family years ago, proving that seeds of kindness always find a way to grow back to the sower. 1 month later, the atmosphere changed from the gloom of the courtroom to the vibrant colors of a celebration. Gabriel and Mr. Frederick traveled deep into the greenery of the village to fulfill a sacred promise. In front of a modest farmhouse, Gabriel knelt before Rosaline's parents, asking for her hand in marriage not as a billionaire, but as a man who had found his missing piece. He declared that Rosaline's struggle was now his struggle, and as a wedding gift, he presented them with the keys to a new home in the city. The wedding ceremony was a joyful fusion of two worlds. High society businessmen sat side by side with village farmers, all gathered to watch the beggar's son marry the girl who had offered him a meal on a bridge. Rosaline looked radiant, her simple grace outshining any jewel Valerie had ever worn. As they danced, Mr. Frederick watched from his seat, a peaceful smile on his face. He had stepped into the mud to find gold, and as he saw his son and daughter-in-law laughing together, he knew his mission was complete.